To lose by stinging you. So usually they won't do it. They might bop you, they might give you a little bit of a warning, but they are very gentle bees and they don't sting. And I was shocked. I had never known this. So part of my education is to teach people that not all stinging insects are bad. So honeybees are by nature a lot more gentle. They will sting, but usually they have to be provoked, or you're directly threatening them in some way, shape, or form. So they're gentle. They are bees that can overwinter. So they will last through our cold winters, where yellow jackets won't, hornets won't. Other bees don't have that ability. And they are so cool because they are like a collective too. So they make their decisions based on the good of the group. They work for the good of the group. So they really are neat little animals that I had no idea way back when. And now I could talk to you about bees until midnight, but we're going to try to keep it to an hour. So with our honeybees, they do sting, they do have a barbed stinger, they will die after they sting, but it's only the women who sting. So if you were to hold a male honeybee in your hand, they just kind of flap around and they have these chubby little butts and they're kind of bigger than the girls here and they're really, really cute. So the males are called drones and then the females are called our worker bees. So those are the two divisions in the colony. The ones that I have in here, I was looking for a boy and I couldn't find any. This was a new colony that moved into one of my old hives. So they're just kind of starting out. There weren't many men around. As far as jobs go, the women, they do everything. They are like the super women of the insect world. So when a honeybee hatches, and it is a girl, one of the first jobs it's going to clean these little cells that are inside the honeycomb. So they're going to be cleaners. They're going to be the builders. They have wax glands that produce the wax that make the comb. So here's a piece. I grabbed a piece that didn't have honey in it. So it shouldn't be too sticky. Feel free to smell it. Feel free to hold it up to the light. And they have the perfect engineering system of making their comb, both for strength, and there is a right side and a wrong side to beeswax comb. When they make their comb from the top down, they put a slight angle to it. So when they pack this with nectar to turn into honey, it doesn't run out. So there's a slight angle down that when they do put the nectar in the honeycomb, that they know it's not going to run out on them. And it's one of nature's miracles that bees just automatically know how to do this engineering, both for strength. It's light but super strong, and it is all bee made. So this material, just like we have wax in our ears, the bees have wax that they produce too, but they produce it on their bellies. So their bellies extrude little pieces of wax, and then they pick that wax off and they turn it into the beeswax comb. So in a natural hive that would be inside of a hollow tree, these combs could be huge and free-forming. They could be small and tucked in. When we have bees inside of a hive, we kind of make them build so it's convenient for the beekeeper. So we will give them just a wooden frame, and some beekeepers put a sheet of plastic in here to give them a start, and they coat it with some beeswax so the bees don't have to work as hard. I don't like to do plastic in my hives, So I don't give them the plastic, I just give them the wooden frame. So the wooden frame is great because when you go into a hive, you could lift it by the ears, you could turn it around, you could look at it, and you could see what's going on. And when they make honey, these white areas that you see, that's capped honey. So the girls, another one of their jobs, after they get through constructing cells, cleaning cells, they'll feed the queen, they'll be the queen's poop scooper, they will take care of the eggs that hatch into larvae, they'll feed them, they'll clean them, they'll put a little blanket over that larva, a little papery cap on top, a little waxy cap on top, and when the baby bees hatch, then they'll clean out that cell and get it ready for either another baby to be put into that cell, or they may backfill it with bee bread, or they may, bless you, they may backfill it with nectar to turn into honey. So those cells are like the rooms of a house, and they're multi-purpose. They could be a nursery, they could be a cupboard for putting their pollen in that will ferment a little bit into bee bread, and then they'll feed that to themselves, they'll feed that to the babies. There'll be nursery cells, and then we'll also have honey that gets stashed into these cells. On this frame, you could kind of see that slant a little bit better. So the bees filled this blank in with the wax comb, and that's making the rooms of their house. So this is a smaller edition of a Lang hive. It was just easier to carry by bringing one of the small ones in. So it will have a floor, then it will have a hive body, and then we have the frames that go in. The bees fill those in with wax. These are stacked. We have an inner cover because the bees lay wax down on everything, and they also make a product that's called propolis. Propolis is from tree resin, and the bees will go out and grab from pine trees and other trees that have sap. They'll grab some of the propolis in their mouth, chew it up, and then they'll use it to seal up little cracks in the beehive. It's a natural antiseptic. Can you hear the change on them? Mm-hmm. They know that there's no queen in there. They figured out that she's missing, and they're upset. So that nice little hum that we had before, mm-hmm. within an hour, they could tell that their queen is missing. And that's that different pitch. So we talked about the males, the females, and the main star of the hive is the queen bee. I don't have the queen in here. This was a new colony. I didn't want to disrupt it because as you can hear how these bees are, if I take the queen out, the hive that I leave at home that doesn't have the queen, it's like a roar. They could tell that she's missing, and then it upsets the whole apple cart. The second reason that I don't like to take the queen out is because this time of year, she's laying up to 1,000 eggs a day. And those are all new workers for that hive. And that's going to boost the population too. So I tend to leave her home, especially when I have little kids. They're like, "Where's the queen? Where's the queen?" I said, "Oh, you know, she might be down below. She might be sleeping. It's her bedtime." And that's enough to keep them entertained. So with the honeybee colony, we have the frames. We'll put that in the hive body. Then we have the top that's an inner cover because they like to gum this up a lot. We'll put on an inner cover. And then after the inner cover, then we'll put a roof on. And that's the basic setup. When they outgrow the bottom and they have everything filled in, Then we'll just take the roof off, take off the inner cover, add another box that has all frames for them, and then you just build upward, and they'll fill that in. If the bees are really happy, if we're having a good season without a whole lot of rain, and we have enough rain for things to grow, but not so much rain that the bees really can't get out and forage as much. So we had an awesome bloom of black locust trees recently, if anybody noticed that. They look like big globs of white flowers hanging from the trees. Black locusts they're superfood for bees. Clover, dandelion, even maple tree, a lot of tree pollen that bothers people's allergies. Bees absolutely love that. But when that rain comes and it's raining for days and it's steady, a lot of that pollen and nectar just gets washed. So it really trips them up. So all of our pollen that comes in, so they are pollinators, so they're moving pollen, whether it's in your garden or out in the wild with any kind of weeds or trees. They're doing a ton of pollination. Apple trees, peach trees, almond trees, pear trees, blueberries, strawberries, you name it, they're helping pollinate. So if you have plants that make the bees happy, that's great, because a lot of people have just absolutely sterile yards that they dump a bunch of chemicals on. There's no dandelions, there's no clover, there's nothing. Plants are great, but you have to watch what you buy, because sometimes you'll buy a plant and they will be treated with neonicotinoids or other chemicals that deter pests. And those plants are absolutely toxic, not only to honeybees, but bumblebees, butterflies, and anything else. So if you are looking to help the bees by getting some nice plants in your yard, check and see whether the plants are treated or not. Because you might think that you're doing something great for pollinators and you're actually poisoning them. So that's the flip side of buying your plants, that you need to check it out. Back to our queen. So one special egg that's in the hive, these worker bees are going to nurture it, take care of it, feed it a substance that the worker bees excrete that's called royal jelly. Sometimes you'll see cosmetics may have royal jelly. It's supposed to be youthful and great for your skin. So these worker bees will feed one special egg, one special larva, take care of it, and by feeding it royal jelly, the queen will develop. She will be bigger than a worker bee. She will develop ovaries, and she will be able to lay fertile eggs. And that's her main rule. She only goes out of the hive once, and that's for her mating flight. She'll go to a drone bar. So all the guys in the hive and other hives in the area, nature has this special spot, and scientifically they call it a drone bar. It's the place where the guys hang out up in the sky, and they have no idea how these male bees know to congregate in this spot. So when the queen hatches and she's ready to go out on her mating flight, she'll take a squadron of female warrior bees, and they will surround her, and she will be in the middle, and they will escort her to the drone bar. So they are there because we have birds and other things that would love to pick off bees, especially the queen bee. So her squadron will protect her. They escort her to the drone bar, and she mates with up to 50 different males. For the guys, it's over. As soon as the mating takes place, they die. She fills up with as much sperm as she can hold. So if you have a virgin queen in the hive, she's smaller. After she goes out and mates, she plumps up because that's her entire supply of sperm for her lifetime to lay these thousands and thousands and thousands of eggs. If it is poor weather, sometimes a queen is poorly mated, she'll run out of sperm and then she doesn't have fertile eggs anymore. But usually the mating flight's successful, she comes back to the hive and she never leaves again. She's there and her job is to just lay eggs, lay eggs, lay eggs, lay eggs. And she'll do that up until about October for us in Pennsylvania. And then she'll take a break in the hive until about mid-February. She'll start to lay again. She can choose whether she lays a girl or a boy. She can pick. So as you can see, this hive, they're all mostly girls. So the beginning of the season, that queen is going to be laying almost all girls, just to get that workforce up and be able to get that hive going and replace any bees that die over the winter. So these bees are more summer bees. They have the genetics that they're only going to live a few weeks and then they die. So they start their role in the hive, and then their very last job is to go out and forage. So the bees that you see on the flowers that are bringing in pollen, bringing in nectar, they're at their very final stage of their life. And if you look at them closely, you can see that their wings are kind of tattered, sometimes that they're beat up. They're on their last job before they finally die. And when they do die, if they die in the hive, these females are the undertakers. So any dead bodies, or if a bee accidentally gets squished when I go in the hive, you'll see these girls, they'll grab the body and fly it out of the hive. They are super hygienic. They don't poop or pee in the hive. They fly out to do it. During the winter, when it's really cold, they hold it in until there's a nice day in maybe the mid-40s, then everybody will exit and you'll see all bee poop all over the place. Outside the hive, on your car. So they are super, super clean. The queen, she doesn't leave the hive. The girls are the royal poop scoopers. They'll poop scoop for the queen, they'll take it out. So they have a ton of rules. As far as honey, when these bees go out to flowers and they get nectar, they slurp it up with a very long tongue and they store it in a temporary stomach that's called a honey stomach. They'll fly it back into the hive. They'll either transfer it to another bee or they'll just regurgitate it themselves right into that cell. And when the nectar mixes with their stomach bacteria, that nectar starts to change into honey. It's very wet when it starts. So I think on this, there was a little bit of wet honey. So up in the corner, that was a little bit of very, very fresh honey. It's wet, and if they don't dry it properly, it will ferment, and you'll have alcohol. You'll have mead. It will have a very boozy smell to it if you have fermented honey. So they don't want their honey to ferment, so they will dry this honey out. They'll beat their wings, they'll keep the inside of the hive dry, and that will kind of suck a lot of that moisture out of the honey. And when they feel that it's dry enough, they'll put a little wax cap on top. If it isn't dry, it's going to be open, and they'll wait until it's dry enough. So they have their own testing method to figure out when honey is dry enough to cap. So this honey is capped. That means it's at the perfect stage, and honey never spoils. If they have that dry enough that they could cap it, this honey would still be good in 2,000, 3,000 years. It never goes bad. So honey that they found in the Egyptian pyramids, when they discovered it, tasted just as great as when the Egyptians first put that honey into the pyramid. So it doesn't go bad. If you buy honey in a store and you see that it's kind of clumpy and crystallized, that usually means that that honey is not super heated up, and it's not cut with corn syrup or something else. So natural honey will crystallize at some point down the road. Some honeys take longer to crystallize. Other honeys will crystallize very quickly. Some of them that crystallize fast will be your fall honeys that are from aster, goldenrod, knotweed. They'll crystallize within a month or two. Summer honey that comes from clovers, flowers, any of the summer foods, they don't crystallize as fast. So someone had asked a question in the beginning. They said, well, you know, I buy honey and it says clover honey, or I buy honey, it says this. They're guessing at what the bees are foraging. But sometimes they put their bees in a spot. If they are in an apple orchard and they're primarily on apples, you'll have a honey that's an apple flower honey that kind of has a little bit of an apple taste to it. Down south they have tupelo trees. There's a tupelo honey. When those tupelo trees come into bloom, you can taste the honey, and it's tupelo honey. It's very, very, very sweet. The colors of honey, so this honey is pretty light yellow. That's more of a summer honey. When in Pennsylvania fall time comes and we have aster, Japanese knotweed, and also goldenrod, and some ragweed too, that honey could almost look like molasses. It will be really, really dark. If you have allergies, some people say if you have a tablespoon of honey a day, of local honey, that it helps allergies. I do have some people who said that that works for their allergies. So we talked about the hive, we talked about the queen a little bit. When a hive is booming and they are doing fantastic, the way the bees reproduce is those bees will take a vote and they'll decide who's going to stay and who's going to leave. So if anyone has ever heard of a honeybee swarm, that's how they reproduce. So it gets super crowded in a hive. The queen that's in there decides, I'm going to go and make a new colony. I'm going to take half of this colony with me. So she'll take half of the bees. You'll see this big cloud of bees leave. So a queen will get to leave the hive to go to a new spot. When they are getting ready to leave, all the bees who are leaving gorge themselves on honey because they don't know how long it's going to be until they're in their new home. So even though it looks very intimidating and frightening, usually they aren't going to bother you. So when we have our Thanksgiving dinner and everybody's kind of stuffed and you're ready to hit the couch after you eat all day and you're tired, that's how the bees are when they're in swarm mode. They are so stuffed with honey that they're not really looking to defend anything. They're kind of sleepy. They're really, really laid back. They're just, when they settle in their big ball or big clump, and then they put the queen right in the middle to keep her protected. They'll hang out in a spot anywhere from a few hours to maybe 48 hours, and then that whole clump of bees will go out and they'll head to their new home. Everybody in the hive kind of has their own little say. So when that swarm is in their holding place and they're just kind of hanging out for those hours, one of the bees is going to come back and say, hey, I found this great spot. There's a hollow tree. It's maybe a half mile that way. Then another bee is going to come in and they're going to say, we found a garage and it's really quiet there and it looks like it's going to be well insulated for the winter. I think that we should go there. Then another bee is going to come and say, we found a porch, and right underneath there's this little hole that's about as big as a pencil eraser, but we could squeeze in there and it's going to be a great spot to be. That's going to be our new home. All those bees come back with all this information, and they call it a honeybee democracy. They all vote on what's the best place that they're going to relocate. And it's documented. It is absolutely amazing. Dr. Seeley, who is the rock star of honeybees, he wrote a book, and the name of it is called Honeybee Democracy. And that's one of the things that he observed, that they tracked these bees and they set up little housing developments for them on an island where there weren't any other bees around. And that's what happened. Some bees went to this location, came back. Some bees went to another location and came back. And somehow they all decided, this is what's going to work best. And then they all move en masse to their new home. So it's really, really cool. Then the whole process starts again. That old queen, she has her new hive with her established workers. She just starts to lay again. The bees that are left, the queen left a few eggs that are going to hatch into queen bees, and then the hive that's left, that queen will go out on her mating flight. She'll come back. That's how it should work. Sometimes a queen doesn't make it back. Sometimes the swarm, they didn't protect their queen very well. Sometimes it fails. If it fails and there's no queen in a hive, they do their last chance at getting all the genes out in the area from that hive. The workers, they can't lay a fertile egg, and they can't just invite a queen to come in. So what the workers do is, there's no queen pheromone in the hive. It triggers a response in the workers. They start to lay eggs, but all the eggs that they lay are male. And then that just sends all these males out into the population to spread the genes from the hive. There aren't any more women to make that hive work, and unfortunately the hive will just start to collapse on itself. So they'll reach the end of their lifetime, and then the hive will peter out. But the hope is that some of their genes made it out into the general area. Any questions so far? I hope I'm not boring you.
No, it's amazing.
Amazing, yeah. Wow.
Do you have some kind of dance or something to locate, like flowers and stuff?
So when these bees find a great spot to forage, because they could only take a little bit in their mouth via their tongue, they come back and they do what's called a waggle dance. And the waggle dance that they do, you'll see them come back to the hive, and then they'll do certain turns, and somehow the bees know, based on that dance, where exactly to find whatever. So if they find a stand of black locust trees and that bee comes back, that bee will waggle, and that will tell the other bees where exactly to go. So you could do a thing that's called bee lining, that you could set up a little station that has honey or food. And this works really well, probably for us in July, when there isn't too much good stuff out there. So if you set it up and you start to track bees that come in and go back to their hive and tell their friends to come and get food here, and you start to follow them. So you'd sit here in the chair, you'd have a feeding station set up, and a bee comes here and heads that way right out the door. And you watch a little while longer, and a bee comes here, they head out the door. So then you'd take your feeding station after you have a bunch of bees doing that, and you'd head in this direction, set up your feeding station again, watch the direction the bees go in. And people do this, it's like a hide and seek or a treasure hunt, and sometimes you could find the colony that's in a garage or a barn or a tree that's hollow, and it's called bee lining. You could find them. So if I have equipment in my garage and I forget to close my door, the bees will go and tell other bees at the hives, you know, there's some honey and some free food hanging out here, and it's much easier to grab this and take it back than going out and foraging, because just slurp it up, run it back, dump it. Come, slurp it, run it back, dump it. It's already changed into honey, and it's easy. Just like if in your neighborhood somebody had a stand that said free cookies. And then I'm going to tell you, hey, you know, there's free cookies right around the corner. There's free cookies right around the corner. Well, everybody's going to start to go get the free cookies. That's what the bees do too, that they'll find a spot. So if my garage door isn't shut and I forget and I have stuff in there, I could have thousands and thousands of bees in the garage, which doesn't make my family very happy. So they're kind of conditioned to shut the garage door so we don't have a bunch of bees in there. If you do have bees in your house and you turn off the lights and there's natural light at your windows, that's what they're going to head for, because they think that they could get out. So that's one way to get rid of a honeybee that gets in your house accidentally, if you don't want to kill them. They'll go for the window, and then I do the paper cup trick with the little piece of paper, and I take them outside and let them go. When bees go to flowers and get pollen, it's a little bit different than when they do nectar. So nectar is liquid. They could slurp it up with their tongue. They could hold it in their honey stomach. When they go for pollen, and they'll pack pollen in those little cells, and then the pollen will change into what's called a bee bread, and that's what they're mostly going to feed the larvae and feed their babies. To do that, the bees have pollen pockets. So on their legs, they have shopping bags. And you'll see when they go out to the flowers, they'll grab pollen, they'll stuff it in their leg bag. They'll go to another flower, stuff it in their leg bag. When that leg bag is full, they'll switch to the other leg bag, stuff some pollen, and then when they're all laden down with pollen, they'll fly it back in, they'll pull the pollen out of their pockets, they'll pack it into the cells. So in those cells, there's honey, there's also pollen that changes into bee bread for their babies. The honey is going to sustain the bees during the winter. So they'll eat it a little bit. That will be an energy source. It's very important for them during the winter. So when winter comes, your colony of bees is going to need around 50 to 60 pounds of honey to keep them going during the winter. So during the winter bees last longer because it's cold and they're in the hive. The way that they keep their hive warm in the middle of our Pennsylvania winters, they're going to keep that hive around 90 degrees or so. The bees don't sleep. You hear busy as a bee? They don't sleep. So during the winter time, if your name is?
Marianne.
If Marianne is the queen, we're all going to gather around her in this big cluster to keep her warm. The bees that are on the inside are going to be nice and warm and get a rest. All the bees that are toward the outside, they are going to flex their back muscles where their wings are. And just like you rub your hands and that makes heat, by all of them flexing their back muscles, they're going to keep that circle and cluster of bees warm during the winter, and it's going to be around 90 degrees. When our outside circle gets tired, we switch, and then all the bees on the outside are going to go in toward the queen. They're going to take their rest, And the bees that move to the outside circle, they're going to start doing that back muscle wiggle to keep the hive warm. And they do this if it gets cold in October, November, December, January, February, March, April, almost into May, to keep that hive nice and warm. There aren't any babies to worry about in the winter, so their primary function is just keeping the hive nice and warm, eating honey for energy, and just keeping their queen nice and toasty. If in the springtime we have one of these crazy Pennsylvania springs where it's 60 degrees and then it will tank down to about 30 or 20, a lot of times the beehives won't make it. So those crazy fluctuations like that, so they are used to, all right, we have a hive, we have our babies in here, they're in their cells, they're warm enough, but then that temperature takes a steep nosedive. What they're going to do is they're going to not have that cluster, they're going to spread themselves thin and use their bodies to cover the babies to try to keep them warm and save them, because the babies are all spread out throughout that comb. So a lot of times you'll open a hive in the spring and you'll see all the bees over the comb and they're dead. They didn't make it. And one of the reasons why they don't make it is if we had one of these temperature fluctuations, they'll sacrifice themselves to try to save the babies. So thankfully this spring we haven't had that problem. We really didn't have any of those super, super cold nosedives. Those are those nights when people are worried about their apple trees or their peach trees or any of their fruit trees that we get a cold freeze. Any questions?
How far will a bee go from the hive looking for food, for nectar and for everything?
They'll go past a mile to look for it. But bees are like people, they're naturally lazy. So if they have a food source closer, they're going to go for that closer food source. If there's a water source, they're going to go for that closer water source. So on hot days, they actually bring water back into the hive to use it as like an air conditioning. They'll try to cool it down. Yes?
Is it kind of like a balancing act when you're getting honey out, that you're leaving up in there for them to survive?
Yes. So some beekeepers like to take all the honey and leave the bees with sugar, water, sugar syrup, sugar substitute, sugar, whatever. And I feel that it's not as nutritionally balanced as their natural food sources. So I don't take more than what I need. I just grab a little bit here and there, and sometimes for the winter I have more than what I need, and I'm happy with that. I'm more in it for the bees than the honey.
How long does it take for a bee to hatch?
How long does it take a bee to hatch? A queen bee is on a quicker schedule. From egg to hatch, she takes 16 days. And then she's in the hive for a little bit, gathering her strength before she goes out on that mating flight. So probably by day 20, she's back and already starting to lay some eggs. With the other bees, the drones take a little bit longer, and they are going to be more like on a 20-day cycle. And if you put your hand on here, you could actually feel a little bit of the heat that they're generating, because they're trapped in there. They're also laying down a little bit of wax on the glass already. So these little white flecks inside. There's another one up there. They're laying down some wax. And they're,
Did you get that group in there?
How did I get that group in there? I went into the hive, and I'm a nerd. I talked to my bees and I said, I know I'm going to be taking you away. You're going to be away from your queen. You're going to be really crabby. And I tell them I do this because hopefully it will educate people that maybe they won't kill a future generation of this hive. So I'm kind of crunchy like that. So I just lift them out. This piece comes off. So I lifted them out of the hive. I put that in, put the top back on. If I have them out for a while, I'll put a frame with a lot of honey down on the bottom to give them something to do. So since they're just coming out real quick, I didn't put anything down below. If I do have a hive down below, you'll see them duck down, grab honey from that other comb, bring it up and redistribute it. It just gives them a job to do while they're out and about. At nighttime, bees go back into their hive. They hang out there until it gets light in the morning, then they'll come back out. If it's really hot and muggy, 90s and muggy, the bees will get too hot in their hive and they'll actually come out at the entrance, and it's called bearding. They'll all hang out like people hang out on their porch when it's a warm evening and they don't have air conditioning, trying to get a little bit of air. So all the bees will kind of hang out outside the hive on hot nights. And then they'll just sleep outside. For my bee yard, I have my hives up about this high, and it's to keep skunks away. So if your hive is down low enough, a skunk will knock on the hive with its claws or its paw, and the bees will come out because they know something's going on, and the skunk will grab a bee and eat it, and it will tap again, and it will grab a bee and eat it, and it will just sit there and feast on your hive. So an old-time beekeeper guy said to me, he said, you always want to put your hive up high enough so a skunk can't show its belly. He said that if a skunk has to raise up on its hind legs to get at something, it won't expose its vulnerable belly, and they will usually leave your hives alone. Other animals that are a pain, raccoons will goof around on hives, and it will make a hive very aggressive, because I had raccoons dancing on my hives at night. I found out with a game camera. I had a hive that just got really, really nasty and mean every time I would go to open it. And then I found out that these baby raccoons, these little raccoons, were playing on it at night and banging and smacking it, and it was making the bees upset. And when I opened it, they thought it was me who was doing that at night. I found it out via a game camera. I do have electric fences that I put around my beehives. They are a deterrent for bears. They are not a guarantee. Bears have such thick fur that sometimes they will touch an electric fence wire and it won't even faze them. Some people bait their hives or their electric fences where their hives are with bacon, and they'll put a piece of bacon on the electric wire, so then if there are bears in the area, the bear will get it in the nose or mouth, and then it will be enough pain that the bear knows this isn't a nice place to hang around. Bears can dig if your wire isn't close to the ground, your low wire, and the wire's up here. They'll dig a little bit. They could go underneath the wire. They can rip down fences. So bears really can smell a hive. And interestingly enough, we all hear about Yogi Bear and the honey and Pooh Bear and the honey. Bears won't go for the honey first. They'll eat all the larvae. They're looking for the protein. So the first round when a bear comes in, they'll usually eat all the larvae, they'll leave the honey. Then the next night when the bear comes, they'll come and they'll eat all the honey. It will be their dessert at the end. And they'll tear apart boxes, they'll rip apart all the comb, and they really are a nuisance. But everybody
Bears eat the bees like the skunks?
Yeah, they'll eat them.
doesn't bother when they get stung?
I guess not. But I know someone who had a very mean, aggressive hive, and the hive was able to chase off a bear. Any other questions?
Is there any other bees that could try to, that are kind of parasites or to them, or any other kind of bees like that are kind of bad for them, like wasps or anything like that?
Yellow jackets they'll prey on honeybees. And sometimes they will wipe out an entire colony. If a colony is weak and the bees aren't on their game, and especially in the fall, yellow jackets could come in and they could decimate a colony.
Do you ever go out and, like when people, like my cousin does this, in Allegheny County, and they have this thing, there's a group of them, and they'll say, like, if you have a swarm of bees, don't call the exterminator, call us, and they'll go collect the bees.
We have a few people in our club who go out and do that.
Yeah.
Some of them do houses, but not too many people do that because it's just, we do it as a hobby.
Yeah.
And when you get into something like trying to get bees out of somebody's house, the one person I know, he was at, I think it was KinderCare on Route 6.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a massive colony. The comb in between the studs was gigantic, but it took him and another woman who helped him. They were there 11 hours on Saturday to try to get everything out.
Well, the other day when you called me, were you going to do that? Get a swarm off of a tree up by the community house?
Yeah, I had one that was close to my house at the Waverly Community House. They gave me a call, and I went over to get them. I got all my stuff in the car, went over, and Dale was going to meet me up there and videotape it, but within a couple minutes, all the bees decided they found their new home, and they were totally gone. Yes?
What about carpenter bees? I have a problem with them.
They are very, very destructive. So sometimes they say that.
I caught 4 of them.
How did you catch them? In a carpenter bee trap?
No, I made my own net
Oh,
on a pole with the hanger. And I had netting that was round on top and about this long. And I made the hanger go around this way, clip it. Mm-hmm. We have a shed in the back that's shed that we pull our tractors in. Mm-hmm. And then on this side, we have an outside wood burner. The roof is like this. The bees
are drilling into it.
Drilling holes in it. Last year, they drilled. This year, again. Now, I went out there and I said to my son, they're not here yet. So 2 weeks later, they were here. They drilled right in the beams that go this way for the roof, right into the beam. Small holes, like eraser pencil.
Yeah, they'll drill the holes into the wood, and then they lay their eggs in there, and then woodpeckers will come, and the woodpeckers will try to get the larva, and they make the holes even bigger. It's very, very destructive. There are carpenter bee traps, and they have YouTube videos that it looks like a little wooden, almost like a birdhouse with an angled hole. You have to drill it at an angle for it to mimic a carpenter bee. And when they go into there, because they'll take over another bee's hole, they drop down, and usually they have a water bottle twisted on the bottom, and when they're down that far, they can't make their way back up.
We sprayed stuff in it, and we were told that it's raw wood, and that's why they drill into it. If it was painted, they would probably not drill into it.
Pressure treated, they won't drill into. Painted, it depends.
Pressure treated they are, because my
Are
son,
they?
has a hunting room built maybe 15, 20 feet off the ground.
They are drilling into that.
Treated wood, they're drilling into that.
Because they won't go in the underside of my deck, which is pressure treated, but they will go after the pine, even though we have it stained and painted. They're drilling
They're
into
still
that.
going after it. Well, these 4 I caught 2 Friday and then I caught 2 Saturday.
They have those carpenter bee traps, and you could use the tennis racket
They're
method.
big. They got black tails, solid black tails. 2 of them were alive till about 2 hours ago. Because I put them in this bottle and gave them air.
Spray them with a spray.
So they were, no, the one is still alive.
It's hard to spray
One
them.
is still moving a little bit.
You could use poison. That would be like a 7 dust. You could dust the holes.
We don't use poison, we have a dog.
So those are some of the things that they use for carpenter bees.
Well, I hope they're gone now. Those are the 4 that were there probably. Because I have 15 blueberry bushes and
They are actually pollinators. They will be on your blueberry bushes. So even though they are destructive, they do pollinate.
well, I don't want them drilling holes.
So let the ones pollinate who have holes drilled in
Yeah.
a dead tree.
Got one more question.
Yes.
Kind of like on what she's saying there, because we just put up, it was a Girl Scout project that my daughter was involved in, masonry bees. And I guess
Mason bees, yes.
right, we put in, little houses on the south side of our house, as close to like where our garden is. But so far, nothing's gone in there. Like I said, take like about a year or like.
So mason bees they look just like a honeybee, but they're smaller. And they are super, super gentle. You could play with them on your hand. If you trap them, they'll sting, but they are even more gentle than a honeybee. Sometimes they're called orchard bees, and then there's a type of pollinator bee like that that's called a leaf cutter. They cut leaves and they make their nest out of the leaf. So mason bees, if you see advertised, they have like a block of wood with all these holes drilled in there. So mason bees don't drill holes. They take advantage of existing cavities. So if you have like a patio umbrella that has the holes through it that you're going to put the pin through, they'll fill in any kind of a hole. They'll fill in if there's existing carpenter bee holes. Usually those are too big though, or if there's reeds or anything that's a smaller kind of hole.
We got there like cardboard tubes, like a whole pile of these.
So they'll use these natural wood holes, or if you have a carpenter or a mason bee house and you have the cardboard tubes, that's more hygienic because once they raise their larvae in there and they hatch out, you just take the old tube and throw it away. So there isn't any kind of pesticide residue or any kind of disease left in there. You would rotate those tubes out. But if you have a spot in your yard that has some mud that they could access, they need a little bit of a muddy area. So they could bring that mud back because they fill in those holes with a little bit of mud, and that's how they set up their nests. And they are super pollinators. When these little mason bees go to like an apple blossom, they are in this ecstasy where they like just go crazy on it, and then they go to the next flower and they do the same thing, and they have their whole body enveloped in this pollen. And sometimes they call them orchard bees because they just pollinate orchards like crazy, even better than honeybees do.
Does it take like the flowering to attract them to the tubes, or does it usually take a while for them to figure out that there's a house there?
It depends. It depends how many mason bees you have in your area, but usually they'll find it. And some people call in the early spring, like in April, and they'll say, we have a honeybee problem, and it's actually little mason bees that are hatching. The one lady had brick on her house, and there were little gaps in the I guess it would be concrete or cement or mortar in between bricks, and there were all little mason bees hatching like crazy out of there. So they will,
What hive you have? Like,
Pardon?
how many years would a hive go with the descendants, you know?
it depends because we have colony collapse disorder. We have a lot of herbicides, a lot of pesticides, and then we have a gift from overseas that a mite, Varroa mite, was brought into our country, and they are like ticks for bees, and they're all over the place, and if the mites overrun a colony, it will make the bees weak, and they won't be able to fight off diseases very well. So a lot of hives, maybe about 70% of the hives don't make it every year. So wild hives seem to have a better rate, but with wild hives, the studies that they've done is there's a lot of distance between hives in the wild. There's about half a mile between hives. Those bees naturally swarm because they're smaller areas, so they are swarming more, and that kind of breaks the cycle on the mites. So in the wild, some of those hives do much better than beekeepers' hives.
You have any experience with Africanized bees? They're not around here, right?
Africanized bees are more of a problem down south. We do have some hives that have a little bit of an African gene to them because a lot of our bees come from California, Florida, Georgia. When beekeepers and orchards get bees to come up to do pollination, or people buy bees for their hives every year, a lot of times they are from the south and there might be a little bit of an Africanized gene in there. But pure African hives, our climate is really cold for them to exist in the wild.
They're very aggressive, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes there is a little percentage of an African gene when they do genetic testing on hives. So who's ready to sign up and get a beehive?
He went in, my cousins, when they were doing the honey.
That was quite an
Honey.
experience.
He suited up
Oh.
and into it. I stayed in the house,
That's my,
out the window.
I always know you're smart.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to do that with the camera, with the suit on, go right in.
you are more than welcome, Dale. We'll have to get a date when it's not a rainy, stormy week. And with bee temperament too, if it's a rainy day, I don't go in the hive. They're cranky. They don't like when it rains because they can't get out and forage. If it's really hot and humid, or if a storm is going to be moving in, they are very, very testy and crabby too. So it's similar to how we feel about how it is outside and with the weather.
How often do you get bit?
How often do I get stung?
Stung?
With the suit on,
Oh,
usually I don't. Once in a while, like if my glove is close to my skin, or if I'm leaning over and that veil is close to my face, I may get it, but usually not too much. One time I forgot to zip up by my neck. One got in and I got it right on my lip. And I had this big one big Botox lip, like the Kardashians or whoever goes for Botox, but I only had one. They didn't match, so the bottom lip was huge and full.
Another bee.
I guess you're not allergic to them, right?
I'm not, but I do carry an EpiPen with me. I do carry Benadryl with me. Friends of mine who are keepers, one or two have been stung like in the throat or more on the face, and they had a severe reaction even though they aren't allergic. So just on the safe side, I do carry an EpiPen with me because you never know. It's good insurance policy to have.
no, my dog.
That's a bee suit you got right there?
So the equipment that I use a smoker. So I have an old pine cone in here. So I'll use dried pine needles, I'll throw a pine cone in there, and it's kind of how I condition my bees. The smoke masks if I have stingers or a pheromone on my gloves from when I accidentally squished a bee or something. But when I go to the entrance, I kind of give them a little puff before I go in, let them know I'm coming in. And then before I take off the roof, I'll kind of go around the hive a little bit. Then I take the roof off. I'll go in that inner cover hole and give them a little bit of smoke.
Does that calm them down?
So they say it calms them down, but it's also a conditioning tool that here comes the smoke. We know somebody's going to be in here messing around, and hoping that it calms them down a little bit. And I try not to stress them out. Other gear, I do have gloves, protect my hands. And then with my suit, you see people on YouTube who are beekeeping wearing like shorts and no protection, but I'm not that person. I don't like being stung at all, so I make sure I'm pretty much suited up. With my pant legs, I will tuck these into my high boots. So this is inside my boots. Bees have a tendency to crawl up, so if you have an open cuff on your leg, they're gonna go on your shoe and go right up your leg. Shorts too, they'll go right up your shorts, so I don't mess around. I make sure that I have some protection.
But it's cooler on YouTube if they have shorts on it.
Yeah. Hive tool, since they like to lay down this glue, I'll use this to pry a frame. They'll glue these frames down, so I'll give that a pry, or I'll use the hook that's on the end to bring this up and unstick it. And I'll also use this to scrape off excess material.
How do you get the bees when you're taking it out? Do you have to urge the bees off there?
So if I'm going to take a comb of honey, I'll either take a handful of grass, or I have a turkey feather, and I'll just kind of give them a gentle brush back into the hive, and it takes a little while, or sometimes I'll give them a little puff of smoke to move them off that. Then I'll hurry up, take the comb of honey, put it in a different box, put a lid on it to keep them away, because they don't want you taking what they work so hard to do.
Well, you need a suit to get those out of there and back in the hive tonight?
Absolutely, absolutely, yep. Because they are not happy with me at this point, because I took them away from their home, I took them away from their queen. They're gonna be cranky, and it's gonna be later when I go home too. So everybody will be back in the hive, and I'm gonna rip the roof off. It would be like if you're in your house sleeping and someone comes and rips the roof off, and you're in your bed and you're like, oh my God, what's happening?
There was a guy at the Hartford Fair last year, and he went in with the bees there in a little cage there, but he had no suit on there. Did they have certain bees in there that are not as aggressive, or what?
Some people are more brave than what I am.
I think you're doing the right thing.
But it's interesting, in Europe, they actually have places where you can go, and they have a room that will have beehives underneath with vents, so the bees can't get up to you, but the air from the beehive circulates around you, and people say that it has healing and calming, and you could rent these little houses, stay there for the night, and the little bed in there, and they have the vents, and they find it to be this healing.
Do your bees know you? Like when I put that suit on, you know, with the camera, are they gonna sense me smell me as a stranger, or would they?
I don't know. I don't know, because my kids don't like to do what I do, and they don't want to be near my bees, and my husband isn't into it either, so I'm really the only one up there.
How many bees do you have?
I have about 3 hives going.
How many in each hive, roughly? A couple thousand?
If it's a new hive like this, it will be less, but once the population comes up, probably around 10,000 bees will be in there.
It'll all be your neighbor.
But I can't believe how loud they are.
Kind of like the cicadas that I heard today.
Yeah, my son, yeah, they're very loud.
I was up at the high school,
That's
the
where he's at.
access road,
Yeah.
and oh my, they were so loud.
And that's how you could tell sometimes when a hive doesn't have a queen, that you open it and you just hear this, and there's a difference between this sound. A happy beehive will have a hum that will be, and everybody just sounds nice and happy. So if you're interested in it, great. If you're not, hopefully you learned something. And if you don't want to take the plunge into honeybees, mason bees are awesome. If you just put out a little mason bee house, you're kind of helping your area pollinators. All you need to have is a little piece of dirt that gets wet once in a while, and we haven't had that problem with the wetness.
In it, or just
No, just somewhere nearby that you have an area in your yard where it doesn't have grass and there's just a little bit of mud there.
Pot of dirt like this.
Yeah, you could do that,
Okay.
because they need that mud to pack into their tubes.
Are they enemies of honeybees, the mason bees? No.
Nope, no, they get along well.
How about wasps?
Wasps can be predatory. Wasps, yellow jackets, bald-faced.
Paper nests, but the honeybees, do they have open nests out of paper hanging?
Sometimes you'll see honeycomb hanging from a branch and
An open comb?
open comb hive, and they won't make the winter. Like as soon as October, November comes, they're gonna lose it. But somehow they didn't get the memo. They might be more of a southern bee, that they think that they could do that, like they can do in Florida or Georgia, and they just don't make it here.
I've seen a lot of paper ones hanging in trees. What would they be? What kind of bee would that be?
The paper ones that look like a basketball, or they're a little bit elongated, those are bald-faced or white-faced hornets, and they're about the size of a carpenter bee, and they're very aggressive. They're mean.
How do they get along with honeybees?
They don't. See, a lot of those other bees aren't vegetarian. They'll prey on caterpillars, other insects, and they're carnivores.
Oh. But these aren't, they just the pollen and the...
That's it, just the pollen and the nectar. That's all they do. They will attack if a yellow jacket gets into their hive. They'll attack it, but they won't eat it. They'll just take the body out.
So the DEP was talking about, how the climate's going to change in Pennsylvania. They're talking about soon we're going to have 3 times as much over 90-degree weather. Eventually Pennsylvania will be like the climate of Arkansas. At least that's their projection. Do you think that'll have an effect possibly on honeybees?
I think that they adapt very well. It's just those fluctuations in temperature that kind of get them.
Yeah, maybe the mild winter is good for them then?
It depends, because sometimes if we have a mild winter and beekeepers don't leave enough honey in the hive, the bees are more active, they're less dormant, and they'll blow through their honey stores a lot faster because they're just more physically active. So if we are into November, December, and we have 50 degrees, they're out of the hive searching for flowers and food, but we don't have that kind of stuff going on that time of year. So they're expending energy, and then they're coming back and they're consuming honey because there's nothing else to consume. So they'll move through their stores faster. If we have a warmer stretch into the winter, and a beekeeper feels that they don't have enough honey in there, they'll throw just bags of sugar in their hive for that extra food just in case.
Very interesting, thank you. you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Anything about bees?
That's very interesting.